Welcome back to Mind Over Matter, the space where mental toughness meets inner wisdom and where personal growth isn't about forcing you way forward, but learning how to listen more deeply. I'm your host, Anya, and today's episode is one of those conversations that gently stretches the mind while opening the heart. We are diving into Akashic Records, finding the meditation style that actually works for you and often misunderstood world of intuition and spiritual gifts, not as something mystical and far away, but as something grounded, human, and surprisingly practical. Joining me is Stephanie Potter, a former corporate professional with a background in investments and marketing, who followed a very different inner calling. Over the past decade, Stephanie has immersed herself in metaphysical studies, including Akashic Records, soul reading, astrology, human design, numerology, Reiki, and more. So, what makes her work so refreshing is this: no guru energy here. Stephanie shows up as an everyday seeker who believes intuition isn't reserved for a chosen few, it's something we all have access to. As a channel, she acts as a bridge between the spiritual and the human, translating insight from spirit into clear, relatable, and loving guidance. This episode is for anyone who's ever wondered, am I intuitive or am I just imagining things? And is there a way to meditate that actually fits my mind and life? So let's get into it. Welcome to the show, Stephanie. It's such an honor to have you.
Thank you, Anya. It's a perfect honor to be here, and what an amazing intro. The only thing I would add is that I actually still have one foot in the corporate world and one foot out of it. So I'm not completely gone from it yet, but I think it's a good balancing my masculine and feminine when I look at what I do every day.
Yeah, that's an amazing balance. And Stephanie, people often hear Akashic Records and think it's something distant or only for spiritual experts. How would you explain the Akashic Records in a way that feels grounded and accessible?
Yeah, the Akashic records are something that we're starting to hear more and more about every day. It's something that's been around for thousands and thousands of years, so not something new, but maybe a new concept. The way I would explain it, kind of you can go down 2 paths. You could go down the scientific path, and so that would get us into quantum physics and such. And so that may not really be my area of specialty. And so I'm gonna hand that over. There's a wonderful scientist named Irvin Laszlo that handles kind of the scientific quantum physics part of it. I tend to lean more into the spiritual and then to my actual experience working with them. But the way that I would explain it is that when we look at everything that's ever happened in the world, past, present, and future, everything has an energy. You could say an energy signal has energy. And we know that energy can't be destroyed. So that's a little bit more science again. But what happens is that there's energetic imprints of everything that's ever happened, is happening, and will happen. So when we think about things with energy, we think about events, humans and souls, animals, plants, things like that. And so the ability for us for there to be an energetic record of all the things that are happening on our planet is kind of a very big picture thought, right? And so the way that I like to bring it down is if we think about to ourselves as humans, whether you believe we incarnate once and we have one lifetime, or we reincarnate, so we come down here many times, that energetic blueprint that we come down with and that we leave with is what we consider your Akashic record. And so every single person on this earth is a sovereign being and they have access to their own record. Now, some people like myself have practiced and have the ability to like work with people to help them get into their records or to access information from others. But to keep it simple, it's very much the energetic blueprint of your soul or your higher self. And so that's what we're using when I work with the records. Now, the Akashic records, as I have mentioned, hold so much information and can be used multiple ways. But the way that people, especially your community, when they're thinking about getting closer to their truth and being mindful, you're going to start with your own Akashic record.
Mm-hmm. That's so fascinating. And How can everyday people begin working with this energy, like without feeling overwhelmed or underqualified?
There are several different ways to start working with this energy. One thing we talk about is building up your intuition. So, doing practices that help you feel a yes and a no in your body, or, start following your intuitive hunches, whatever they look like. Some people it's a gut feeling, some people it's a feeling of warmth. And if you'll notice, a lot of times when I've talked about this, I'm talking about feelings in your body, right? So that's practicing intuition by listening to what your body's telling you, maybe not what your ego and your brain is telling you. For Akashic Records specifically, where I would point people in a few different directions, one would be that you can find guided meditations online. So if you write in guided meditation Akashic Records to YouTube or Insight Timer or any other kind of free available places, you'll find guided meditations. And what that means is there's somebody walking you through, telling you what to envision and kind of how to get there, which I think is really powerful, especially for those of us that like to watch TV or movies because you can picture it and follow it along. Another way that we practiced, the way that I learned through classes and such, was using what we call a pathway prayer. So essentially setting an intention to get into the records and talking about your truth and your honorability and, being of the light and being a channel for the records. And that can show up in many different forms. We always I have to mention the OG of Akashic Records, at least in the United States. Obviously, the Akashic Records are thousands of years old, but in the United States in recent times, Linda Howe, Howe, kind of come out with a book called How to Read the Akashic Records. And it's kind of the first place that I would point everybody to. But what I would say is that you could potentially read the book and help figure out how to get into your records. The one thing I would say, no matter what you do to try to get into your own Akashic records, maybe it's even just being still with the intention to get into your records. Remember that you may not see a whole bunch of things, right? So if you think you're going to all of a sudden see lights in a library and this and that, some people won't. But that might be how your first, what I would call spiritual senses work. And so for me, the first time I went into the records, I didn't see or feel anything. And so I thought that I had done it wrong or I didn't have whatever gift that I needed to get in there. And what I learned is that I had different kinds of senses. So maybe I didn't see something in my head, but I could feel something in my body. Or had I listened, I would have heard something. So, like clairaudience. And so, what I would say is, every time somebody wants to go into their records, be open to listening to what you get back. Sometimes it might start with just a word or a color. And the more time you spend practicing, the more information you will get. I hope that's a good intro response.
Hmm. I love how that reframes it, like from something mystical and intimidating into something deeply personal and usable.
That's exactly it. One of the things I like to work with people is that all the answers you seek aren't actually outside of you. And so sometimes, like whether it's religions that we've grown up with or that we were indoctrinated into, or religions that we're finding, many of them point us to sources outside of ourselves. Not all of them, but the idea here is no matter what you believe, any kind of spirituality, I believe the answers are inside of us, our connection with our heart, the Akashic records, and any kind of higher power. And so it's very nice to know, like, oh, wow, everything that I really want to know can be found inside of me if I learn to listen, right? We're really good at asking for things we want or we don't want or complaining. And some people pray, right? So they talk to a higher source, they talk to their loved ones that have passed, they, whatever that looks like, maybe they journal or manifest. And so that's a lot of talking about what you want or don't want. But how much listening do we actually do? And that's where meditation comes in. And, figuring out, I know we'll talk about it, but kind of the best kinds of meditation for yourself. But I look at meditation as the act of listening. So listening within yourself to connect with yourself, your own soul, or higher power.
Hmm. Absolutely. And so many people say, I can't meditate, but maybe they just haven't found the right style. So, how do you help someone discover a meditation practice that truly fits them?
That's exactly it. I think so many of us are like, okay, I don't need to hear again about how good meditation is for us because I tried it and I can't do it. And so, one of the common myths is that it's like you have to be quiet and you have to let every thought go out of your head. And, you can't be thinking about your grocery list or your to do list or any of those things. And if you continue to do that, you're not successful in meditation. And the point in meditation is to allow all of those things to come up, but allow them to drift away. So you have to be present in that moment and letting those things come up and go out of your head. I like to picture them as like putting them in a balloon and then them floating away or floating away on a cloud, whatever that looks like. Because once you get there, then you can get to the part where you can really listen and open up and enjoy the stillness and see what comes through. But for many people, we all, just as we all learn differently, right? And we all communicate differently. I think we all should meditate differently. And so there's so many different kinds of meditation. Some are physical, you're moving. Some are, like, again, like I talked about a guided meditation where someone's giving you visual imagery for you to follow so that you can stay on pace. Some have to do with just listening to different kinds of music that are working within your brain to help you meditate. For some people, it's actual physical movement. And so the idea is that I think people write off meditation pretty quickly because they think, oh, I can't do it because they think of it one way. And so one of the things I developed in my corporate life, I'm a product marketer. And so my product marketing brain went to work for the sake of meditation. And I built a quiz. And so essentially, it's 5 or 6 questions about a person. And from there, it will give them the top 2 kinds of meditation that might be best for them. So we're thinking it could be like a chanting, it could be a galactic kind of meditation, it could be, something where you're having to repeat back something. And so the idea is this quiz will give you the top 2 kinds, and then for each kind, 3 sample meditations for you to try that are on the free Insight Timer app. They are for sure not my voice. I don't have a voice made for meditation. I basically listened to a whole bunch of meditations and had friends and recommendations and picked ones that were highly scored. This way people can go in and give it another shot and kind of find out. And I would say it also changes, right? Because depending on your day or the time in your life, the kind of meditation you may want to do may change, and know that that can be flexible too. But I think in the US, we don't do a good job of saying actually a meditation is more than just trying to close your eyes. And so I'm so glad you asked this question because to me, I think it's a really powerful thing to try to give meditation another shot, but also know that meditation, in addition to resting your brain, will also bring through answers that you seek.
Yes, 100%. And what's one sign that a meditation style isn't aligned with someone's nervous system or personality?
The good thing about meditation is it's never going to be harmful, which is a good thing, right? So it's not like doing like a sport or an exercise that's actually going to physically hurt you. I think where it's if you are really dreading it, it's probably not a good assignment, right? I think it's, people that are like very maybe type A or that are trying to plug meditation into a certain box between 9:15 and 9:30 every morning. And then if they don't do it, they feel like they failed. And so I think that would be a sign. I think where you need to be flexible with meditation is finding where it fits in your day, and then if you're not able to do it, having some forgiveness or some flexibility with yourself. Because I think people try to, say, I'm only spiritual if I meditate 5 days a week or whatever that might be. And that's not the case. I think it's even if it's 5 minutes in the car before you come in from the end of your day, that can be a meditation. For some people, it is just turning on music and doing the dishes or cleaning the shower and just allowing whatever to come into their brain. So I think it's if you're trying to define exactly what it is, or you're trying to say something specifically makes you spiritual or that you have captured it, if you do it a certain way, when you start putting those parameters around, I think that can be a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so I think that allowing yourself to relax and be flexible with it and finding different meditations for different times in the day, I think is really great. One of the things you'll see if you do the quiz is that and I make no money off this. I pay for it outright. There's nothing that's paid for. I'm not trying to sell anything. I think it's just in service to meditation. But what I would say is one of the things you'll see is that the meditations I've chosen, some of them are 5 minutes and some of them are 55 minutes. And so, again, depending on where you're at in your walk, your day, or your life, there are options for you.
Yeah, that's such a relief to hear because it takes meditation out of the box of one size fits all.
That's exactly it, or maybe some people got brave and like took a class and it ended up being like a meditation and breathwork class. And they maybe didn't feel that that worked for them. And so they're like, oh, I tried it. I tried the meditation thing, but that's just one of 20 ways to meditate. And so I think it's one of those things where, again, we've got, day to day in our society and culture we have so much information coming at us, right? So not only are we trying to speak or do into existence what we like, but we also have all this other information coming in, whether it's through the news, through websites, through your phone, through, whatever that may be. And so we're not really used to listening for an answer or going inside and trying to connect with ourselves because there's so much information coming at us. So that's a beautiful playground, right? For our ego and our brain because our brain wants all the information. And so sometimes we start making all decisions from our brain instead of listening to our intuition, our meditation within meditation, or listening to our body. And the idea is that where a lot of people run into anxiety, and I'm not a doctor, but is where our body and our truth is trying to tell us one thing, and our brain is trying to protect us, and our ego is taking in all the external information and trying to tell us another thing. So that would be a differential of what our brain is telling us that usually runs out of fear and what our body is trying to tell us that runs out of love. And when there's a disconnect there, people often feel very unsatisfied in their life. They feel anxiety or stress. And so the thought here with meditation is also getting you to be here now, to be present, to be in your body, and hope that that wisdom in your body will start to come through. But it's kind of overwhelming because the way our lives are set up day to day is to find information in so many other places, and there's so much coming at us.
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely. And you often say that everyone has a spiritual gift. Why do you think so many people doubt their intuition or dismiss their inner knowing?
That's so true. I do say that. And I'm actually even changing my own verbiage to say spiritual abilities or spiritual senses now. Because spiritual gift, I do believe it's a gift. I believe all of our senses are a gift. But, the gift of sight, we kind of take for granted, most of us every day, unless you're blind or you have eye problems. And so they are gifts. But sometimes if you say, I have a gift that's a spiritual ability, it feels like you've been given something that someone else doesn't have or doesn't have access to. And so, spoiler alert, everyone has spiritual abilities and spiritual senses. They don't all look the same. And I think where we kind of feel like, well, maybe I didn't get that, or wow, I must not be special enough to have that, is because we didn't just wake up one day and have it. And, we hear so many stories, right, about people that, had an accident, a near death experience, or just woke up one day and had this incredible mystical experience. And now they can see auras or speak to those who have passed. And I think those are beautiful, wonderful stories, and we hear them more often. And I'm so grateful for that. But actually, what we don't hear enough about is the people that work every day a little bit to learn to connect with spirit. And so, while we all have these spiritual senses, we all have different spiritual senses, and they will tend to change the more you work on them. And so we could relate this to playing the piano, right? Some people can just kind of get on the piano and within a lesson or two or teach themselves and they're incredible, right? And there are some people that study for years and then become incredible at their own pace. And so I would say the same thing about spiritual senses is that some people do, they wake up and they just have something going on. And for better or worse, they're able to use that. What I would say is there are also the people that go in, like myself, and spend a lot of time learning. And then at one point in my kind of career or path, really practicing and doing like the work to refine them and figure out one, what are my spiritual senses? How can I best work with them? And that has changed over time as well. But what I would speak out to your community is to just re-emphasize that everybody has spiritual abilities. So anyone that says, "Oh, I have this gift and you don't," that is kind of eh, don't love that. So the idea is, again, everybody has spiritual abilities. We just don't know which ones they are. And in a day and age, again, where we're getting things as quickly as we want, right? An answer from Google or ChatGPT or Uber Eats on our porch or Amazon one day shipping, whatever that looks like. Having to spend the time to learn about your spiritual abilities, for some people, it will be worth it. I mean, I think it'd be worth it for anyone. For other people, it may not be their passion, and so they might work with someone like me or somebody else to learn more or to tap into different kinds of source or information. But what I would say to people is absolutely know that you are special. We all are. And we all have spiritual abilities.
That's beautiful. And how can someone tell the difference between true intuition and fear or overthinking?
True intuition comes through in the most subtle way, and that's why I think we override it a little bit. True intuition comes through very softly. It comes through in a way that feels like truth, in a way that feels like love. Sometimes it's just one word or a few words. It's really kind of our body or our higher self, or sometimes our spirit guides, depending on what you believe in, kind of nodding to us, what is right, where we should go, what our internal truth is. And our ego, which is a beautiful part of our brain that's set up to keep us safe, right? Especially in, hundreds of years ago when we were being chased by tigers and bears and sharks and whatever that might be, is set up, to keep us safe and to keep us comfortable and to keep us doing the same thing. It wasn't big on change. And so if your what feels like intuition comes in and is overly negative, if it doesn't sound like it's from a place of love, that it feels like shame or fear or anger or any of those things, that is for sure not your intuition or anything that would come through from a spiritual side of things. Absolutely, it may ask you questions to question something that might be hard, but anything that comes through it in that kind of way, shape, or form, or comes through loudly, or comes through with all of these like 45 sentences, a lot of time that's our inner critic, our inner ego, lovely trying to keep us safe, but not always for our benefit. And so, what I would tell people is when we think about intuition or we think about spiritual guidance, it's very much about truth, love, things that are coming across that, are really simple, but connect us closer to, the people that, we want to be on the inside, who what our true truth is. So I know that was a lot, but that would be the connection I would say.
hmm And that distinction feels huge, especially for people who live mostly in their heads.
Totally. I think a lot of us, myself included, live so much in my head. I like to think I have so many tabs opened up every day. I only think about like tabs on a computer. Um, but for me, I think it's slowly about drowning that out. Like for myself, I know with the work I do, for a long time, I've had to stop watching the news because there was just so much negative energy coming through the news and it felt very unbalanced. And so for me to be able to hold space for other people and be a clear channel, I had to back off of the news because I know, even though it's fascinating and especially international news to me, is so fascinating. I knew that for myself, I had to back off for that. So I think for some people too, some practices that they could even take into account just to start to give space to hear their intuition would be, backing off the amount of time you're online, the amount of time you're checking in on your phone, things like that. Because every time you do that, consciously and subconsciously, you're opening up kind of programs in your head. And so the more you can back off that, the less you can be in those things and consistently, you know, taking up space, the more space you leave for like more intrinsic intuition and heartfelt messages and guidance to come through.
Yes, totally. And listeners, here's a small experiment you can try this week. Once a day, pause and ask yourself, what does my body already know about this situation? Don't analyze, don't Google. Just notice the first sensation, image, or feeling that comes up. Write it down. Even it feels subtle or uncertain. That's intuition strengthening through trust. And if this episode sparked something in you, share it with a friend who's exploring meditation, intuition, or spiritual curiosity, but doesn't know where to start. And if Mind Over Matter adds value to your journey, take a moment to follow, rate, and review the show. It helps these conversations reach more open minds. Remember, clarity doesn't always come from thinking harder. Sometimes it comes from listening softer. Thank you for being here, for staying curious, and for choosing growth that honors both the mind and the soul. I'm Anya, and this has been Mind Over Matter.